So, shalom everyone. Good evening, Shiva. Uh, Welcome to this evening's, this Parshas, this Shabbat's Shiur. And we are in a very interesting portion. It's called Parsha Chukat. And over the years, we've done so much of the Parsha. We've studied different levels of the Parsha, different angles of it, different midrashes, right? The regas of it. Uh, Today, I also want to talk about the Darigah of Pasha Kukhat and specifically about how this how this Parah Adumah, right? It's what it's called as a para, the red heifer, is involved in the entire Levitical priesthood, and what does it symbolize? What does it stand for? Now, if you go back historically and you see right through the ages, right to the scribes and the Pharisees and the rabbinical outlook of of all the during the time of the Tanaim and the Amorim, okay, and the entire gamut of the scribes of Israel, you will realize that they tried their best to understand and to decipher what this Para Aduma is all about, but they were not able to do that. Even Shlomo HaMelech, the wisest of all men, put his hands up and gave up, and he said, I can never come to a conclusion what this Para Aduma is all about. Really. So it's one of those things in the Torah. God has commanded them that, don't think, just do it and do it for your own good, right? And we're introduced to the Para Aduma in this portion that just comes in like a flow of events, right? Like a flow of events that comes through. Now, I want you to understand this thing very clearly. This one thing. When we introduced to Para Aduma in this chapter 19 of Bamidbar, okay, of being in the desert, and the last Parsha that we had, right? Parsha Shalachim. Do you realize Parsha Shalachim, okay, Korach, in fact, Korach, sorry. Korach happened literally around 2 years from coming out of Egypt. Okay, and then they traveled to the land of Israel and they came to the border of it, and then they sent the spies in Pasha Shalachim. And you'll know the big story about Pasha Shalachim, how they sinned, okay, and God said, turn around. And last Shiur, we seen how that brought down Moshe in the eyes of all. And Korach was the one who was the first to take cognizance of that, and he went in for the kill, right? And so they turned around and they came, and all the reference of in the Bible that says that they dwelt in this region called Kadesh Barnea, right, which is very close to Kadesh, around the wilderness of Zin, okay, which is in the southern portion of Israel, very close to Edom, and they just dwelt there. Now, from that point of turning back and going into Kadesh Barnea, and where we are introduced to this Torah portion, this portion Chukat, there is a silent year gap of almost 37 years. So we don't know what has happened in 37 years. Because here we see the storyline that God calls, Moses and tells him, okay, tells him about the Parah Adumah and about the purification. Then we see Aaron going up to Mount Tahor and dying, right? He's divested of his Bigde Kehuna and he goes up to Tahor and he dies. And then it talks about King Arad, and they had a war with Arad, okay, and then they swore, said, God, if you give these people into a hand, Lord, okay, they made a vow to God with the king of fire, but this Arad is also part of Amalek, okay, from the background. So they took a different name, but basically they're part of Amalek. Then we see about the death of Miriam, and then we see about the serpent, right? And this serpent, and this is the action-packed parsha in this time. But if you look at Parah Adumah, and we look at as to what this red heifer is all about, and how what has it got to do with Tumah and Taharah and purity and impurity, that is something that we want to touch about, that I'm going to touch about little today, not much, but hopefully bring things into perspective. Now, out of the blue, God Hashem tells everybody, he tells Moses and he tells Aaron, do one thing, take a complete red Adama heifer, where there is no yoke which is ever laid on its back, it's never worked in its life, and bring it and offer it as a sacrifice, not on the temple, not in the Ohel Mohed, not in the Mishkan, okay, but it has to be far away, outside the camp, okay, and it has to be opposite the Holy of Holies, outside the camp. Now, if you're taking this in Second Temple era, or the temple era where Shlomo was, where he built his Mishkan, the direct opposite of the Holy of Holies is Mount of Olives. So this is where the Kohen Hagadol, or his deputy, or the Levite or the Kohen who overseen the entire procedure or the halakha of the Parah Adumah, would have done and slaughtered and burnt completely the whole Parah Adumah on the Mount of Olives. It's very interesting to note that. And then he would stand, he would sprinkle facing the Beth Hamikdash, okay, and then they would bring in the ashes into the city of Jerusalem. In the desert, in Bamidbar, the Oel Moed was in the center. Okay, so that was ground number one, ground zero. Okay, and that ground zero was holy. It's where the Shekinah glory of God rested. Nobody impure would actually penetrate that barrier and go into that holy place. Nobody. Around that were the Levites, okay, and that was camp number 2. The tribe of Levites surrounded them with Merari and Gershom and Kohath and all the full tribes surrounded. So camp number 2 were the workers for the Mishkan. Camp number 3 were the tribes, Mathe Israel, were the tribes of Israel, and they surrounded everything. So there were 3 kind of camps. One is ground zero, the Levites 2, and the Israelites 3. So each had their degrees of separation from the Mishkan. Even in the Beth HaMikdash that Shlomo built, okay, you could not take Korban offerings or Khatat offerings outside the Temple Mount. There were exceptions. What was the exception? One exception was the Shlamim offering that was allowed to be taken out, but eaten only within the confines of the walls of Jerusalem, not outside that. All the other offerings and Korban, okay, were within the vicinity of the courtyard of the Beth Hamikdash. If it stepped out, it would render itself impure. Why is this? Because the presence of God, the holy presence of a Shekinah, would rest within that holy of holy place. So it rendered that place, the very tiles, the very flooring, everything within the Beth Hamikdash was considered sacred, sequestered to God, and holy. So anything that entered into that place had to have a degree of a thing called Tahara. There had to be no Tumah in that place. If Gentiles ever walked into that place, Now I'm talking about, let's look at the Mishkan in the desert. When it was built, it was erected, and Moses built it. Only the Kohen Hagadol could go into the Kadosh Kadoshim, the holy place. The sons of Levi and Moshe and the workers could go into the holy place. And in the courtyard were the Levites. They had their work. Outside that, anybody brought their sacrifices would come to the gate of the Ohel Moed and offer the sacrifices and give it to the Kohen HaGadol, and they would do subsequently the service inside right till the holy and holy place. So it was very, very difficult for a common person to enter into this degrees or darega, okay, level steps of coming holy and holy. That is why in even the book of Ivrit, the book of Hebrews says that once a year, the Kohen Hagadol would enter into the holy place. And God gave very strict instructions. You just cannot enter into the holy place as and when you like and feel like it. Okay, there has to be certain prerequisites for you to enter that place. Now, when the Shekinah glory lifted and indicated that we have to move, everybody move, blow the trumpets, we have to move. Okay. Then the holiness lifted from there, and they would go in and dismantle it, pack it, put it on their backs, on their carts, and transport it in order, and then go and refit it back again, and then the glory cloud would descend and remain out there. So what renders something pure and impure? It's very, very simple. That anything that is within the vicinity of the proximity of the anointing, of the glory of God, is deemed holy and deemed pure, tahara. And is able to stand over there, is deemed pure and tahara. So if you're looking for answers in the book of Hebrews or Ivrit, read it from this point of view. That if you're able to enter into that holy place, that means you have a certain level of tahara, spiritual sanctification. That means there is a rectification that's happened in the spiritual realm of your life. Therefore, you're able to enter into that holy place. Now, just to give you all a glimpse, now, when a child has been brought down, right? When a man gives a seed to his wife, put it on mute, please. Thank you. Okay, when they are in unison, when they're in union, and a seed is given, conception happens in the womb of the woman. A soul has descended from above. A soul has descended from above. Now, in what circumstances, on what level of purity that union has happened is very important at the same time. We live in a world that we are so completely impure from many things. We do not have that level of purity that even in our unions, husbands and wives, there is no level of purity that is really acceptable in the presence of God. Why? Because if that's the case, then the children that we are bringing down would be remarkable. The soul that we're bringing down would be remarkable. Okay. The descent of the soul, if it's come in a certain level of purity, to sanctification, to prayer, to holy union, understand? That level of soul is very beautiful. Okay, but there are degrees to it. I'm trying to explain the degrees to it. For a soul that's been brought down responsibly and in pure Tumah, okay, that soul comes down in the Tumah and it's born and brought forth in Tumah. being born into this world is not the final descent. So the descent starts little by little, little by little, little by little. And as the fetus is growing in the womb, the fruit is also growing. The fruit is growing, right? The baby is growing. And that growth itself is a descent. So there's a physical growth and there's a spiritual descent, which is much like a fruit that's hanging on a tree till it ripens out, right? It grows, 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 grows till it becomes big, huge, yummy, and ripens out. And when it ripens out, it falls. It falls, it rottens out on the ground. It goes to waste unless it's picked. But the child that's in the womb is constantly descending. It's either descending in purity or it's descending in impurity. When I'm using the word pure and impure, don't get into your brains to think that, we're talking about the physical, जो दिखता है सामने ये अच्छा है, ये clean है. It's not about that. It's about spiritual zuhama, pollution, how much my soul is polluted and how much I have been descended in either a level of pollution, in a degree of pollution or a degree of purity. It depends on the parents. Okay. So birth is just that now the laws of physics cannot contain that because it's ready to start a different type of growth. So from a child, from a newborn babe, till the age of 12 and 13, you see a physical growth. So that means the soul is actually still descending. The body is growing, but the soul is still descending. Therefore, a child talks like a child, behaves like a child, jumps about, runs about, is innocent, and he's learning things and he's absorbing things and he's negotiating with this world. He's understanding who he is. That descent is still growing. Once the child hits 12 years and 13 years, then it comes into the level of self-consciousness that, yeah, I am me, I'm alive. And that's the level now where God says, you have to do your bar mitzvah. You have to do your confirmation. So till then, till the descent is actually happening in that soul, that child, God considers it innocence. There is no accountability because the soul has not reached its full consciousness to decide between good and bad, to choose between good and bad. Now the soul is descended in Taharah. It's mentored, it's tutored by the children, by the parents, by the Horaha. And the parents have the responsibility of teaching, showing the word of God, getting them into a habit of praying, okay, how to live life, cleanliness. There's a whole lot of stuff. This is parenting stuff. That's why the instructions of the parents are extremely, extremely important in this, to bring that soul, to prepare that soul in instructions. God says, I know Abraham, he will instruct his children to keep my commandments. Okay, it's very, very important to understand this. Then that soul gets consciousness and is ready to enter into life because it understands. Now it starts eating the fruit of knowledge of good and evil in a certain way. Okay, in a certain way, because now it has a choice. Should I do this or should I do this? Till then, a child just does things, doesn't think, right? So this is that level of purity. Now the descent, I said, is in either purity or impurity. The highest level of impurity is Tumah, death. The impurity that comes from death. Right? Tumaat, the highest level of impurity. So wherever you see a dead body, that means that soul that has descended has lived a life, okay, lived a life, and if that soul is departed back, it's left back a physical body, and that physical body is being captured by the impurities of creation. And all the impurities of creation now are eating into that physical body, and that is contracted the highest level of Tumaat. It's called the father of all Tumah, of impurity. Therefore, the Torah and Halakha says, it talks about uh, touching a dead body, okay, being in the vicinity of a dead body, being in the house of a dead body, who's allowed among the family members to touch, who's not allowed, whole lot of things. Okay, I'm not going to get into all that today. Now, this is very, very necessary. Why I'm telling you this? Because when you're studying Parshat Chukat and about the Parah Adumah, the Parah Adumah somehow has the ability to deal with this Tumah, to deal with the impurities that come on a human being, on any man or any human being, to live a normal life, live a good life. In camp number 3, in camp number 2, and definitely camp number 2, and definitely ground zero, because the Kohanim have to be at the highest level of Tahara. They cannot operate in the vicinity and in the presence of God if they are displaying highest level of spiritual Tumah. They can't operate. They will fall dead immediately. Over. So the difference now we have to ask ourselves, what's the difference between Parah Adumah, which is something really outside the Levitical priesthood of the priestly service of the Pesach offering and the Khatat offering and all these other offerings. And it's very different. It's absolutely different. We will study the difference, hopefully, if we have the time. But how different is it from the Korban Pesach, Passover? Because the Korban Pesach also is not really, doesn't fit into the Levitical priesthood in a way that, it's on a constant basis, on a daily basis. The Korban Pesach is a once a year thing as a commemoration of what happened once in the history of this creation. It's never going to happen again. It will never happen again. So the Korban Pesach also follows the same principles. The Korban Pesach, the blood had to be taken, right, in a vessel, and hyssop taken, and the hyssop is to be used dipped in that blood and put on the lintels of the house, right, on the mezuzah. In Parah Adumah, you also have the cedar wood and you have the hyssop. You have the same thing, and the blood. So it parallels, they mirror affect each other. They look very similar to each other, except for the Pesach, Korban Pesach was a one-time thing. It was only for that specific night to bring the children of Israel out of Egypt, and that is it. And it took them from the lowest level of Tumah, 50 days and 50 steps up, 50 days, counting of the Umer, till Har Sinai, and brought them to a level where God was able to descend, stand, and they were able to stand before the Lord, and the Lord was able to give them the 10 words and give them the Torah. But if they were at that level and maintained that level of Tahara and done all the mitzvot and the commandments that God had ordained for them through Moshe, probably may not have been death so frequently in the camps. Many of them would have lived very long lives. There wouldn't have been so much war. And even if there was war, none of them would have lost their lives because God would have protected them. So the highest level of Tumah, of spiritual pollution would not have been really existent to that great extent in the camp. So now we're left with a one-time solution of Pesach, which happened, brought out. Now, how do I maintain that level of Tahara? Now we sit and scratch our heads. 1 second. Now what do? We brought out for a purpose. That's done. But hey, we are dying. We have problems. There's diseases in the camp, and this happening and that happening. What's happening? So God says, okay, now we need to have a solution to maintain this tahara. So he introduces Parah Adumah as a stopgap solution till the time, and he says this is for all time generation, as long as this is applicable and as long as it's useful to you until the status quo changes, it is forever for you all. I hope you're getting what I'm saying. It's very, very important for you all to understand this. Therefore, the Parah Adumah has been introduced in the picture, and therefore we see the laws of the Chukat and the laws of how you do it and all that stuff. So this is the background of it. Okay. The difference of Pesach Shani, Korban Pesach was a one-time thing. For Parah Adumah is for maintenance level. That means it has to be constant in our lives. We can look at the New Testament. We can learn many things from there, and we can do a lot of parallels. We can take examples and say, okay, it's talking about Yeshua, it's talking about this, it's talking about that, allegorically, similes. We can do all that stuff. I mean, that's really not going to do anything to us except for like mentally just decide, okay, this is what it's talking about. But the essence of the Parah Adumah is something else. Okay, please turn with me to chapter 19 of the book of Bamidbar, Parsha Chukat, and we'll try and read something from here and understand. Okay. וידבר אדוני אל משה ואל אהרון לאמור, זאת חוקת התורה אשר ציווה אדוני לאמור דבר אל בני ישראל, ויקחו אליך פרה אדומה תמימה אשר אין בה מום, אשר לא עלה עליה עול, ונתתם אותה אל אלעזר הכהן, והוא זיהה אותה אל מחוץ למחנה ושחט את לפניו. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron saying, this is the chok. Now we introduced to chok, right? We all have studied three things. One is mitzvah, one is chok, and the other is mishpat. When we've studied this, I think we've done this in the book of Exodus. Immediately after chapter 19 in the book of Exodus, okay, Parsha Yitro, we were introduced to Parsha Mishpat. And it's about the relationships between how you treat another human being. On a personal level, on a corporate level, even if he's a worker or whatever, that's Mishpat. Basic human labor laws. So all the legality that's involved in that comes on the Mishpat. Okay. So you have Chokim, Chok, which is a statute, it's a decree. God has said it, do it, don't think too much. If you try to think too much, you'll go crazy, you'll go cuckoo. Don't do that. Just do it because it's for your own good. Now, there are a couple of things which are Chokim in the Torah. Really don't understand some of it, most of it, in fact, but Parah Adumah is something we really don't know what it is all about. All it does, we know. How to do it has been explained. But if we think very carefully to the Spirit of God and Ruach HaKodesh, it can give you a glimpse as to what's happening in the spiritual realm. So chok is just do it, right? Don't ask. It's decreed, it has to be done. No exceptions. No exceptions at all. Mishpat is about being equitous in your life. That means how do I deal with people there. my decrees, my thoughts, my intentions, my speech, how do I treat people, okay, general behavior, okay. And the other one is mitzvot or edut, testimony. So all this actually basically come in the mitzvot, but is bifurcated into testimony because all the mitzvot that I bring this and I bring that and I offer this and I give 1/10 and I do this, that's all mitzvot. And be tzedakah and give righteousness and do righteousness and all mitzvot, friends. When I do mitzvot, I have a testimony, I have a edut. Correct? So now we are left with these three layers. One is what? Chok. The other is mishpat. The other one is edut, which is all the mishpat. Now within this chokim, David uses this word sometimes in the Psalms. He says, your word is chokhot, is established, it's decreed and is established in the heavens. That means it's immovable. It's immovable property and part and parcel, the DNA of creation. It cannot be removed. But from top to down, there are levels of Tumah spread all across the spiritual world. Spread all across the spiritual world. And the descent of the souls that's coming to this earth, that's descending, it's picking up the Tumah and coming. You know, when a child is born, when a child is born, the moment he's born and the doctor takes him in his hand, touch, finish, Tumah. Why? Because you and me are all part. Every Gentile, every Jew who's living today himself has levels of Tumah met. The highest level of impurity, that's called Tumah met, which is Tumah of death. So you and me, we are all alive, but yet there is a mixture of Tumah met. That is why it says in the book of Revelation says, for the last enemy to be conquered and to be overcome will be the enemy of death. And says, oh, death, where is your sting? Right? Where is your sting? Hope you all guys are getting what I'm saying. So every walking, talking human being today has got Tumah met, because at some point of time, I am going to die. And you are going to die. And everything that we do in life involves Tumah met. It's overflowing in our very essence, our edzem. It's overflowing. Well, I can say that, you know, I'm a believer, I believe in Yeshua, and I'm a spiritual Christian, and this and that. But you know what? You are going to die. You are going to die, but you will resurrect on one day. But right now, you are going to die, because Tumah met is very much part of your physical body. No one can escape this. So therefore, when you look at the Torah, in fact, the sages have bifurcated Tumah into 8 categories of Tumah, in levels of separation of to how the Tumah really affects all of us, right? Really affects all of us. The highest level, let's start from the highest level, is Tumah met, of death. Then after that, the next highest level of Tumah is called Nevilah. Nevilah is when someone, a Kohen or a Shekt or a Shochet, a Jewish Levi, is trained in the slaughter of kosher animals, right? He is doing a kosher cut, a shechting, the ritual slaughter. And something goes wrong in that cut. Maybe his intention wasn't there, or he messed up in the action, or the blade, the knife, something wrong with it. Boom, that full ritual slaughter is Nevilah. Immediately it contracts the highest level of Tumah. it has to be thrown to the dogs. It says, Yeshua says, he says, don't take that which is holy and throw it to the dogs. This is what Yeshua meant. Consecrated animals that are brought for ritual sacrifice in the temple in the Beth HaMikdash and were shechted, the process of shechting, not zabak. Zabak is sacrifice. Zabak means I just cut and I say, this is sacrifice. But shechting is very, very specific from a kosher point of view. And something goes wrong there. That's Nevila. Immediately that body contracts Tumah, the highest level, the second highest level of Tumah. The third level of Tumah that contracted is from unclean, really unclean biological life and animals and creepy things around you. It's called sherets in Hebrew. Worms and all those things and rats and all those things, those rodents and all that, because when they die, see, when rats die, so you get plague, right? Plague comes from a rat. Bats, rats. Okay, these are all things that are very susceptible to spiritual Tumah. Why? Because when creation fell into that spiritual decline, all the biological life that was created and were connected to the different levels immediately pulled down and got absorbed into the Tumah of creation in different levels with the human being. Okay, so that's the third level. The fourth level is Tumah Keri. Tumah Keri is basically when a man gives a seed, when he goes and he's in the act, a sexual act, and he gives a seed, he's with a woman, he gives a seed, and that seed falls. He doesn't know. It falls on his thigh, or it falls on the ground, or he doesn't bathe, he doesn't have a wash, he doesn't have a bath, and that seed goes into his clothes. That level, that's the fourth level of impurity. Because that seed is a soul that you're bringing down. Okay, the potential for a soul to come down. So it's very, very holy. But immediately it contracts Tumah. Okay, so I'm talking to you all generally, but you'll need to think about the implications of what I'm saying to all of you all. The fifth level is Tumah Zav and Zava. Zav is emission. People who just spit, just feel like spit. Anything that comes out of your body unnaturally, unnecessary, brings impurity. If you cut yourself and blood flows out, the first thing we do is to, put it in our mouth or something. And people do this all the time. It's kind of suck blood. Whoa, dangerous. You're impure immediately. Also, emission from the male organ and from the female organ. Zav and Zava. Okay, that level of impurity that is contractible. Then comes Nida, the laws of Nida, where specifically for a woman who conceives, goes to the period of gestation, gives birth, and the moment she gives birth, she has these periods of purification. Like the book of Matthew talks about, that when the days of her purification was over, Miriam brought the young child to the temple. So Miriam also went through the days of Nida. So the whole lot of laws about laws of Nida and purification and childbirth and going and dipping yourself in the mikvah and and purification with water and a whole lot of stuff. I spoke to you all about Yeladim, right? When the child is born. The moment the child is born, touched, child contracts. With itself, it contracts all the Tumah met around them. And the last one is Tumah Metzora. So Tumah Metzora, remember this Torah portion in Leviticus, Vaikra, it talks about Metzora, leprosy, spiritual leprosy. It's the lowest level of Tumah. Actually, the lowest level of Tumah. This lowest level of Tumah now is when the soul, your spiritual, remember I said that your descent, but once you're descended and living on this earth, and you're living on this earth now, and your spiritual impurity, you're not dealing with your spiritual impurities through prayer, to fasting, to connecting back to God, to many, many things. And you're not dealing with it. And you go on to multiply it. You go on to increase that Tuma inside of you. You're not bothered. I don't care. I just want to live life. Then it breaks out into the physical realm. From inside, it comes out. It starts with your skin, rashes on the skin, this, that, sicknesses, diseases, boils, fevers, and then serious illnesses like cancer and this and that. All that is a result of a spiritual condition. But that spiritual condition is too far gone. So God understands humanity, He knows humanity. And when He's looking at the earth and He's seeing the full earth in Tumah and in Metzora, and He's saying the festering, boils, sicknesses, disease, all this happening, God says, you know what? I will send my son, Yeshua, and he will rectify you from the inside and give you the opportunity to purify and to cleanse yourself. We take it seriously or we don't take it seriously. It's up to us. We are dealing with it or we are not dealing with it. It's up to us. And He's seeing the world in this polluted state and He's saying, believer and non-believer all have to perish. And then when the regeneration of all things, in the regeneration of all things, and in the resurrection, the new bodies will come up, those bodies which are Tahor, holy and pure. And then your soul that is sanctified by Yeshua will be able to live in that pure body and it will be joy. This is what it's all about. Okay. Hope you have understood what I'm trying to get at. Now, when I'm looking at the Mishkan and looking at what's happening in the desert, okay, this Parah Adumah served this purpose for today. We don't have Parah Adumah. In fact, in the whole history of the children of Israel, there were about, I think, about 6 or 7 Parah Adumahs. Not more than that. Just not more than that. Once in probably generations, you'll get a Parah Adumah. But how does Tumah attach itself to us? Tumah and impurities attach ourselves to us when we are the weakest. When your body is weak, when your faith is weak, and you do things that you're not supposed to do, rather when you're feeling slightly sick, when you're not feeling well, optimum, you're spiritually low, therefore your body is low, and that's the time Tumah comes in full force. So the forces of evil, the forces of Sitra Akhra, latch onto your klipa, to that shell, and they put you into a crust, and they break you from inside out, and they put you to this this terrible thing that you're going through. Therefore, a sick person, when he's really sick in his bed and he's having pain and he's going through, he's getting weird dreams and a whole lot of stuff happens because the evil is pulling you. This is something we have to avoid, completely avoid. We have to move on. For too long, for 2000 years, we've not been taught about purity. If God had to deal with Tumaah and Taharah through the red heifer, Parah Adumah in the desert. He has to deal with the same thing today, because how we going to maintain a level of holiness and sanctifications to come in holiness and pray, come before the throne of God, to praise and to worship and to do all of that. How is it possible? We have to listen very carefully, my friends. This is a tremendous message. And if you are not picking this up, if you'll think that everything is ended only with the cross, then you are not doing your part to maintain your life, because Rav Shaul says, work out your salvation with fear and with trembling. He says in Corinthians, he says, I beat my body into subjections so that I can be found tamim. I will do everything in my power to be found tamim, without blemish. So the Parah Adumah, let's get back to that. Was some kind of introduction. Okay, so let's get back now. It says, verse 3. U natathem otha el azar ha kohen vehudzi otha el michutz lamachane veshachat otha leipanav. And you shall give it to Elazar the Kohen, who is the son of Aaron, and he shall take it to outside the camp. So now listen, when I said outside the camp means I'm saying outside the three camps. By virtue of it being outside the camp, by virtue of the Parah Adumah being slaughtered outside the Beth HaMikdash on the Mount of Olives, it has implications, because everything that's holy and that is slaughtered, is shechted in the holy place, on the Temple Mount, is holy because it's in the presence of God. It's sanctified by the presence of God. If it comes out of the holy place, immediately it picks up Tumah, whatever it is. Even the clothes pick up Tumah. If it leaves the gates of Jerusalem, it's picking up the Tumah of creation. But here it says that it has to be taken outside Jerusalem on the Mount of Olives, and it has to be slaughtered, shechted on the Mount of Olives. By virtue of it being outside self, everything connected to it is already Tumah. Are you getting the point? Okay. Then it says, Ve lachak el azar hakohen midamma be'etzba'u vehine el nokak pene ohel moed midamma shava va'amin. Elazar the Kohen shall take some of its blood with his forefingers and sprinkle some of the blood towards the front of the tent of meeting 7 times. Why 7 times? Why 7 times? Now let me explain to you. This is a different level of understanding the deep and the mystical things of the Torah. Okay, this is through biblical Kabbalah, not the Kabbalah which you find outside. Okay, true biblical Kabbalah. Biblical Kabbalah, okay, is about the 7 times, talk about the 7 levels of the Sfarot. There are 3 on top, Chokmah, Bina, Dat. This got to do with the Keter, the crown, and there are 7 below of the Sfarot. The last, which is Malchut, kingdom. The last, which is Malchut and kingdom. So when the Eleazar takes the blood and he sprinkles it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 times. 7 times for the 7 levels of Sphirot, of the emanations of God into this world. At every level of creation from top to down, he's sprinkling and he's purifying, except for the 3. He only does the 3 when he's in the holy place. Listen to this. In the holy place, and for the other various for the other various other sacrifices, he sprinkles 1 on top of the ark of the Aaron and 7 down. 1 on top and 7 down before the ark. Why? Because that 1 is the keter, is the crown. And that 1 encompasses Chokmah Bina Da'at. And 7 for the other Sephirot, emanations from top to down of God in this world. Right from Hod, Netzach, Tiferet, and Yisod, okay, Malkut, kingdom. The entire Sphirot, he's cleansing top to down for the children of Israel, for the camp, for the Machane, friends. This is very huge because our minds are not trained to this. It's very, very huge. So 1 is only done in the Beth HaMikdash, in the Ohel Moed, out there. But here, outside the camp, he's cleaning from the Sphirot, from top to down, all of creation, tak, 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 7 times. Now, why does it take a Parah Adumah? Why does it take a cow? So some say it is a rectification for the calf that they had at Har Sinai, right? That when the child does something wrong, the mother or the parent has to come and rectify it for the child. So anyway, that's a very philosophical point of view. But from all the creatures, kosher creatures that God has created, the least of the impurities are found in a cow. The least of the impurities are found in a cow. So it's pretty much very kosher to the spiritual realm in its essence, in its etzem. Okay. So this cow is taken, it's burned down to ashes. And this ashes is used, mingled with spring water, clean, pure spring water, flowing water. And this has many, many uses because it's used for so many things: purification of utensils of the temple, purifications for a woman in a nida, in childbirth, in zona, in a whole lot of things. In cleansing of the metzora, the leper, the spiritual leper, sprinkle it, purity gone. I mean, impurity gone, purity comes in. But if the Torah is saying that if this thing is sprinkled, the ashes put into clean water and sprinkled on the soul, and the soul becomes pure, why do I need what we are doing today then? If that was capable of giving us that level of tahara, then we don't need to do all this today, right? That should still stand, right? The corresponding level of purity and impurity is corresponding to the human being. So human being has 2 parts. One is the divine part, the neshama that comes from God, the divine soul, and one is the earthly soul, the nefesh behema. Okay, the nefesh behema. So Parah Adumah is dealing with the earthly soul, the living being earthly soul like you and me, the nefesh behema, and nefesh, the blood that's pumping inside of us. That which was what was formed from the ground, from the earth of the ground. That's why it's called Adam. He was called Adam because it came from Adamah, from the ground. We are the epitome of all aspects of creation put inside of us. Water, air, fire, every part of creation is in your body. Creation affects us, we affect creation. But the divine soul that comes from above, the breath of God, that is a different thing altogether. So, till the final solution came, the Parah Adumah, which is the Nefesh Behema, which is the animal soul, corresponding to the animal soul that is within me, squares out. Completely squares out. But what happens that today I get that cleansing and tomorrow I do the same problem again, then I'm back in the Mishkan and I'm back in the Beth HaMikdash doing the same problem and saying, I'm back into problem again. How many times am I supposed to come and do Korban? So all that you're reading of the Levitical priesthood was Nefesh Behema to Nefesh Behema. Nefesh Behema to Nefesh Behema. The blood of the Nefesh Behema of that animal was squared to the Nefesh Behema that I am, my body, because the animal sleep, I sleep, the animal eats, I eat, the animal procreates, I also procreate, I do everything. Basically, biologically, I'm an animal. That is sorting the animal me out. But it's weak. Why? Because tomorrow I'm going to do the same thing. Therefore, now listen to what I'm saying very carefully. Therefore, till the time came that God ordained for Yeshua to come and not deal with the Nefesh Behema only, but to go to the essence, to go to the essence of a human being and regenerate and to be born again within the spirit. That which is the spirit, be born again in spirit, in etzem, in the essence of who you are. And once you are born again to that etzem, to that spiritual being now will exert pressure on your nefesh behema and bring your nefesh behema into perfection, into ta'min, and then you will be left and removed from the clutches of the zohama of creation. The reason why Yeshua came was to remove you from the inside and to set you free from inside. So the outside, which was practiced in the Levitical priesthood, came into perfection. That is why we cannot go back to the Levitical priesthood, because that was a stopgap, temporary structure, temporary thing God put into place till the rectification of the inside came. Once the inside came, then even the outside will be rectified. If Yeshua came to Israel and Israel was walking according to the laws of the Torah in spiritual Tahara, not that level of Tumah, he would not have done a single miracle. Listen to this, he would not have done a single miracle. In fact, he would not have to die, because even it says in the book of Romans, it says, if only they knew who and what Yeshua was, they would not have crucified the Prince of Peace. But the reason he came to rectify is he never came to rectify to give you billion rupees in your bank account, or to give you gold, or to give you money and just. He came to rectify you from inside, so that inside, once is rectified, you don't keep making those mistakes again. Because in the Mishkan 3,500 years ago and in the Beth Mikdash 2,000 years ago, one Jewish man who had a fight with his neighbor, and he slapped him and he slapped him and he robbed him and he robbed him and he this thing, and they whacked each other, and they had to go to the temple and give a sacrifice and say, I'm sorry. But you know what? They would turn around and go back to the house and say, I'm not going to leave him. And the next day they'll get into a fight again, and they'll come back to the temple and give their offerings and sacrifices again. Because the inside was not born again. So Parah Adumah was this solution for all time till inside had to be changed. Now, there are many, many parallels we can talk about, get technical about it, but I don't have the time, friends. I don't have the time. Till the rectification came and you're born again from inside. What is born of the Spirit is born of the Spirit. And that changes everything, my friends. It changes the full perspective of all things. So, who is Parah Adumah for? Parah Adumah is for everybody who does not understand what Parah Adumah is for, who does not know. If you're still saying that Parah Adumah can relieve me from my uh, from all my activities and from my Tumah, you're still dealing with your Nefesh Behema, you're still dealing with your animal soul. But what about your divine soul that is in exile from God and who's suffering inside of you? When that is born again, everything is born again completely, then you would have come into your perfection. That is a different level of Tahor. Therefore, when we come into prayer, when we come into the presence of God and we're worshiping and we're praying God, we all partake of that level of Tahor because we are cleansed, right? Even the Brit Khadasha says, okay, we're cleansed with the blood of the Lamb, we're cleansed with this, we're cleansed with the word of God and the water and this. All allegory for the presence of God that gives life. The power of the resurrection power of God to give life. Friends. So when we read Parah Adumah, when we read this entire story, I want all of y'all to read chapter 19 and chapter 20 of Bamidbar of Numbers and read and reflect on what this is all about. Really, it's very, very important. It sounds, the read itself is, inconceivable as to how can this be? How can this be? And how is it possible? There are many, many stories we can tell you. Hopefully, when we have time, I don't know. But friends, this is what I wanted to share with all of you today. Be blessed and know that when you're standing in prayer, you're sanctified in the presence of God. And God is saying, be holy, for I am holy. Which means that if you're already standing in His presence, you're already holy. Some level of holiness where you are allowed to stand before Him. But creation as a whole must dissolve and all die till everything is regenerated again and we get new bodies. Because the situation is too far gone. God saying it's better it dies and goes so I can regenerate everything all over again, friends. Okay. Take Tahor, take purity very, very seriously. And I'm not talking about physical purity, I'm talking about spiritual purity. Take it very, very seriously. Too neglected a thing in our lives because we don't know the depths of the Torah and the Bible. Two very neglected things. But study it. Call me, ask me. We will talk about these things. We'll talk about Tahor. We'll talk about Tumah. We'll talk about Zuhama. How this touch. Okay. So what we're going to, I think what I'm going to, I've got so much more to talk about this. Next week I'll do part 2 of this. Let me do part 2 of this, and we will talk about now the 8 levels of Tumah. We'll talk about different levels, how it affects our lives, and how it blocks that spiritual, that spiritual connection to God. How it obfuscates our life, our connection with God. Our prayer life goes down. A sense of God's presence in our life. Whole lot of things. So let's look at it from the practical point of view. We're going to do part 2 next week. Till then, God bless. Shabbat Shalom, every one of you all. Litrot, Lalatov. God bless. Till I see you all next Friday.